Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the class. Yesterday, we were discussing about the policy of non-alignment, which was adopted by India after getting independence. And in this regard, we have seen that there were many in the Indian leadership who wanted that India should adopt a more friendly approach towards America, as America was a pro-democratic country, and the group was in favor of freedom. So there were many leaders who wanted India to be more friendly towards America, but uh, Pandit Nehru was not supporting that idea, and he possessed freedom in formulating the foreign policy of the country, as he was the prime minister as well as the foreign minister of the country. And he was one of the founding members of non-aligned movement, and he wanted India to maintain a equal distance between the two camps, the camps of US and USSR. But at the same time, Nehru was also aware that it will not be an easy task to maintain a balance between the two power blocks. And it happened. We have seen the example when in 1956 Britain attacked Egypt over the Suez Canal issue. At that time, India opposed that act of British, and it raised its voice. It protested against this invasion. But in the same year, we saw that USSR invaded Hungary, and in that situation, India did not join. India did not done any kind of protest against this invasion. So, though it was difficult, but in India was doing its non-aligned. India was maintaining its non-aligned character, and it was also the opinion of Nehru that we must follow this non-aligned policy. Then we will be able to get aid and assistance from both the blocks of the both the yes from members of both the blocks of the world, and in this way we will be able to succeed. So this was the situation, and then we have seen that India was trying to convince other developing countries to adopt this policy of non-alignment to maintain equal distance from both the blocks. Uh, and at that time, our neighbor Pakistan joined the US-led military alliance, and US was also not happy about India's independent initiatives and the policy of non-alignment, because US was also of the opinion that just like Pakistan, India should also uh, be with the US bloc. So this caused this policy of non-alignment, which was adopted by India. It caused uneasiness in the Indo-US relationship during the 1950s. And moreover, what we saw that India adopted the policy of a planned economy. And under this planned economy, we started to impose tariffs on import. So whatever was coming from outside the country, uh, our policy was to impose a high tariff on those imports so that we can protect our domestic industries. And not only imports were discouraged, but export oriented growth was also limited. Actually, India was following the economic development model of USSR. So, in the same way, we were emphasizing on developing a resource base. It means we were very much, not very much, uh, uh, not very much having interaction, economic interaction with the outside world. We were not doing so much imports and export with the outside world. So this type of situation was there. Still, India was very much in favor of Afro-Asian unity. Afro-Asian, Africa and Asia, unity of Africa and Asia. Though India was a newly developed country, still we cannot ignore the size, location, and power potential of India. India was a very big country if we consider the territory. Then its location is also very good. It is one of the most important countries of South Asia, and its potential of power was also very high. So, keeping all these in mind, Nehru was of the opinion that India should play a major role in world affairs, and that too in the affairs of Asia. India must play a major role. And for in keeping this in mind, he established contacts with newly independent countries of Asia and Africa, because almost all the countries of Asia and Africa were colonized, and the condition, the challenges, the problems of all the countries are similar. And in this situation, India tried to uh, start a kind of unity among the countries of Asia and Africa, because we have common problems, and if we are united, then our strength will be increased. So this was the opinion of Nehru, and he advocated Asian and African unity throughout 1940s and 1950s. And what we see that even before independence, in March 1947, India convened Asian Relation Conference. So everything was in mind, everything was decided that what kind of foreign policy India is going to adopt after getting independence. So it was on the initiative of India that Asian Relation Conference was convened in March 1947. And India was very much against the colonial system, and it always supported decolonization. It wanted that Indonesia must realize its freedom from the Dutch colonial regime by convening an international conference in 1949. So, after this Asian Relation Conference, which was convened by India in 1947 March, India again convened an international conference in 1949. And what was the purpose of this international conference? It was convened to support the freedom struggle of Indonesia. India wanted that Indonesia must become free of Dutch colonial regime. So these are the efforts which was done by India in order to in order to strengthen the Afro-Asian unity. This is about Asian unity. So these are the two efforts. Now we will see India was also a staunch supporter of uh, national movement which was going on in South Africa. We have discussed South Africa on many occasions, and we all know that South Africa was having the was suffering from apartheid in that country. Apartheid was the biggest problem, and the people of that country, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela, started the movement to uh, end this kind of system. And India always supported this anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, the national movement of South Africa, under the leadership of Nelson Mandela. And then one more conference was held in Bandung, that is called Afro-Asian Conference. In this conference, the Asian countries and the African countries participated, and it held in the in Bandung, and this Bandung is in Indonesia, and the year is 1955. You have came through this Bandung conference when you were studying uh, non-aligned movement in first chapter also. So this is very much important, and this Bandung conference, it was the zenith of India's engagement with the newly independent Asian and African nations. So India was ready to lead the African and Asian countries in the matters of politics, international politics. So these were the efforts which was done by India. So this is very important Bandung Conference of 1955, and this was an example of Afro-Asian unity. Then we will see that this Bandung Conference actually it was the starting of the establishment of NAM. That is why I told you that you have read about this Bandung Conference in your first chapter when you were studying NAM. So this conference has started the establishment of NAM, and we see after the establishment of NAM, its first summit was held in Belgrade, and Belgrade is in Serbia, and the year is September 1961. And we have seen that in Bandung Conference, the role played by Nehru was very important, and other than Nehru, there were other leaders also of these newly independent countries, like Indonesian President Sukarno was there, then the President of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and then the President of Yugoslavia, Joseph Broz Tito. All these uh, have played an important role in the establishment of non-aligned movement, and Nehru was also one among them, and he was a co-founder. Yes, we can say him a co-founder of the NAM. So the important uh, efforts on the part of India, these are the initiatives, these are the efforts, but the most important outcome of this Afro-Asian unity was the establishment of NAM, in which India played one of the most important role. So this is very much important. This NAM. This is the outcome of the efforts of bringing Afro-Asian unity. So now you can read this excerpts from the letter which was written by Raja C. Gopalchari. Uh, it was a letter to Edina Mountain, and in this letter he has written, "A country without material, men, or money, the three means of power, is now fast coming to be recognized as the biggest moral power in the civilized world, and her word listened to with respect in the councils of the great. So what we see, what are the important source of power? How can we have power? If we have material, if we have men, if we have money. So in the context of India, what we see, we were very poor country. We were not having so many materials and money, and we can say that our population was also not very qualified because there was problem of illiteracy, health problems were there. So we were lacking all these things. Okay, we were not having without a country without material men or money. It is about India. It is now fast coming to be recognized as the biggest moral power. In spite of not having material, men, or money, India was becoming biggest moral power in the civilized world. Why? Because of its values, because of its ideas. The non-aligned movement was the most important uh, event of the period of 1950s and 60s. So this Afro-Asian unity, which could be materialized only, we cannot say that it was only the effort of Pandit Nehru, but he played a major role in bringing this Afro-Asian unity because he has the vision. You can say him a visionary because he was watching what is going to happen after 10 or 15 years. So this was the great achievement of India, and this uh, gave India an important place in international politics. So now we will discuss India's relation with China. In general, we have discussed what was the basic things in the foreign policy of India, that was non-aligned movement, Afro-Asian unity, and now we will discuss India's relation with China. So we have seen that India got partitioned and Pakistan created out of India, and from the day of creation, there even before the announcement of partition, there was so much violence was there between the Hindu and Muslim community, and then came the partition, decision of partition, and then displacement of people. So all these things caused so much trouble between the relationship of India and Pakistan, and that Indo-Pakistan relationship will be discussed later. We will see this Indo-China. So India was knowing that its relation with Pakistan is not going to be very good in future because of the problems which were existing at that time. So India began its relationship with China on a very friendly note. India wanted to maintain a friendly relationship with China, and for that, India made all the effort. And People's Republic China was established in 1949, and this uh, People's Republic (PRC), People's Republic China, was a communist regime, and it was established after a revolution. The government which was existing there, that was displaced, and through revolution this communist regime was established in China, which was called People's Republic China. So when China PRC came into existence, it was a communist country. So the Western countries, the countries belonging to the US bloc, were totally against this revolution and this establishment of PRC. But India was very much friendly towards this PRC, and it was one of the first countries to recognize this PRC. One of the first countries to recognize the communist government of China. And Nehru always wanted to maintain a good relationship, a very friendly relationship with China, because he was thinking that as it was a new country, PRC, and it was coming out of the shadow of Western domination. So India must support the Chinese government in international front so that it can establish itself in the international front. And there were some leaders, especially Vallabhbhai Patel. Vallabhbhai Patel was not in favor of having very friendly relationship with China because he has the fear that there may be Chinese aggression in future. So he wanted that India must protect itself against China. India must be suspicious of China. But Nehru was not supported his view. Nehru was of the opinion that it is exceedingly unlikely that India will face an attack from China. And this was the reason that Nehru was of the opinion that there will not be exceedingly unlikely. It means there is not any threat of attack from China, and that is the reason Chinese border was guarded by paramilitary forces and not the army. So this is we can say uh, we have read all about Nehru. The foreign policy was formulated only by the ideas of Nehru, and in the establishment of non-aligned movement, he had played a very great role, and he made India, uh, made the world feel its presence, made the world feel the presence of India. So that was a great achievement. But in matter of China, we can see that uh, he was becoming too much idealistic, and in spite of this kind of fear was there in the mind of other leaders that there may be attack from China in future, but he was not considering that at all. And that was the reason that you can just think that on the border of China there was paramilitary forces were placed, not the army. So this is, we can say, the greatest fault of India's foreign policy at that time. So after that, we see that India and China passed, they jointly signed this Pancasila, which is about five principles of peaceful coexistence. And this was signed by the Indian Prime Minister Nehru and Chinese Prime Minister Zhao Enlai on 29th April 1954. So this principle of Panchasheel was a set of principle which was expected to govern the relationship between India and China. And the important principles, the five principles which were given place in this Panchasheel were mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Then there should not be any kind of aggression from both the sides, and then mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs, equality and mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence. The most important principle was peaceful coexistence, and this was signed by both the premiers, Prime Minister Pandit Nehru and the Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai. But very soon there started to develop tension and conflict between the two countries. And the reason behind this tension and conflict, one of the reason was Tibet. Tibet was its location was central. The plateau of Central Asian region was called Tibet, and it was a buffer zone between India and China. So it was supposed to play a very important role between the relationship of India and China. Actually, what happened that China always claimed its claim over Tibet, and we see that Tibet was an independent nation, and India supported the independence of Tibet. It was not ready to accept the Chinese control over Tibet. And then we see that in 1950, what happened that China took control of Tibet. Tibet was taken under control of China, and this takeover of Tibet by China was opposed by the Tibetan population. The large section of Tibetan population opposed this takeover. And India, in this situation, India was supporting the independence of Tibet, and it tried to persuade China to recognize Tibet's claim for independence. It tried to persuade China to recognize the independence of Tibet, and it should not take over the Tibet. This was the effort which was done by India, but this effort of India was not seen in, uh, it was seen as an interference in the internal affairs of China. The Mao Zedong saw this India's concern over Tibet as it was an interference in the internal affairs, and the People's Republic of China reasserted its control over Tibet, and it tried to end the Tibetan Buddhism, which was present there, Lamaism and feudalism. And all this was done, started to be done by force. But when India opposed all these things, then it was considered that India was opposing one of the principles of the Pancasila Agreement. The Pancasila Agreement, one of the principles of Pancasila Agreement was non-interference in the internal matters and internal matters of the countries, and respecting each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. So when India opposed or India supported the cause of Tibet, it was said by the Chinese side that India was not agreeing to the Panchasheel agreement, and that is why after first India supported the cause of Tibet, then but after India accepted China's claim over Tibet by following the Panchasheel agreement. India accepted China's control over Tibet. But then what we see that in 1956, the Tibetan spiritual leader Dalai Lama, he came with Chinese Premier Zhou Enlai to India. And during this visit, Dalai Lama informed Nehru about the worsening situation in Tibet, how China is using force and trying to change its culture and trying to having more and more control over China. So all this was informed to Nehru by Dalai Lama. But whenever there was talk between Nehru and Zhou Enlai, it was said that China will give greater autonomy to Tibet. It was the assurance given by China that no other reason will be given such autonomy as autonomy is given to will be given to Tibet. But all this was actually not happening, and people in Tibet were highly against this Chinese control. And what happened in 1958? These are the major incidents. This 1956, the visit of Dalai Lama with Zhou Enlai. Then in 1958, there was an armed uprising in Tibet, and this armed uprising was against China's occupation, against China's control of Tibet. And force was used by China. Brutally, the uprising was suppressed by China because China was such a big country and it cannot be defeated by force. And the situation became very bad, it became worse. And then what happened that Dalai Lama feared that uh, there may be something bad may happen with him, so he uh, took asylum in India. And this asylum is to give refugee to any political leader. So uh, asylum was asked by Dalai Lama, and India gave this to Dalai Lama. It is a kind of protection which is granted by any country to someone uh, who has left his home country, and they are called political refugee. When because of some political reason, uh, a person or a group of person leaves their home country and take the protection of another country, then it is called asylum. So this asylum was given to Dalai Lama in 1959 by India, and this asylum, the grant of asylum, was seen as was seen by the Chinese government against China. This move of India mm, was seen very much against the interest of China by the Chinese government, and we see that even today there is a large number of Tibetans who are living in India as refugee. Not only in India, they are living in other countries also. And in India, we see them in Delhi, in Dharamsala, which is in Himachal Pradesh. Actually, Dharamsala is the perhaps maybe it is the largest refugee settlement of Tibetans in India. So the largest number of Tibetans in India are living as refugee in Dharamsala. And Dalai Lama has also made Dharamsala his home in India. You can see it in this uh, newspaper clipping. Dalai Lama enters India with his followers. So Dalai Lama he is entering Indian border with his followers because India has given them political asylum. So Dalai Lama made Dharamsala his home in India. And in the 1950s and 60s, many political leaders and parties in India, including the Socialist Party and the Jansan, supported the cause of Tibetan independence. So there were many parties who supported this cause of Tibetan independence, who supported the asylum which was given to the Dalai Lama, and these parties included the Socialist Party and the Jansang. Though China has created Tibetan Autonomous Region (TAR), it has been created, and though this autonomous region is created, still Tibet is an integral part of China. Tibetans are not supporting. The Chinese claim that Tibet is a part of Chinese territory. Tibetan consider themselves as independent, but Tibet is not an independent country. It is a part of China, and in order to change the culture of Tibet, what is done by the Chinese government, that they bring more and more Chinese settlers into Tibet, so that the population composition should change, and in this way culture will be changed, and the protest which was done by Tibetans will be decreased. So Tibetans dispute China's claim that autonomy is granted to the region. They consider that whatever autonomy is given is not sufficient, and the main purpose of China is to undermine the traditional religion and culture of Tibet. So this is about Tibet, how Tibet became a cause of conflict and tension, how the asylum given to Dalai Lama became a cause of worsening of relationship between India and China. Now, other issues will be discussed in the next class.